Hi, my name is Caroline Bockel and I'm Director of Corporate Services with BIM. This short tutorial is on the subject of calculating your carbon footprint. This is part of our series of mini tutorials to guide applicants through the Processor Capital Support Scheme, which BIM is administering on behalf of the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine and is funded by the Brexit Adjustment Reserve. We're now looking at the environmental impact section of the application form. This guidance is looking at section 4 of the application form, which requires people to calculate their carbon footprint. And we do this to determine whether we need a climate proofing statement. Question 4.1 is looking at whether the investment is an infrastructure investment. The EU has issued guidelines which says that infrastructure investments include industrial buildings and physical assets in the area of food. Therefore, the vast majority of investments under this scheme will be included. Elements that won't be included would include commissioning or installation, but we would expect the majority of capital investments to fall under infrastructure investment and therefore will require the calculation of carbon footprint. Where this is required, you'll proceed to the next question, 4.1.1. Question 4.1.1 requires everybody to determine if the investment is above or below 20,000 tonnes of CO2. For our purposes, we are looking at this in kilograms as this is the easiest to measure, but the guideline is 20,000 tonnes of CO2 per year, and this is the carbon footprint of the asset. Applicants can use any carbon calculator that they choose, but we will not accept those that have a disclaimer attached that says that it should not be used for carbon calculation purposes or carbon footprint purposes. Therefore, we would recommend that all applicants use the Carbon Trust Green Business Fund carbon calculator. The link can be found both in the application form as well as in the guidelines to applicants, or you can search for it. This is the calculator that we're now going to work through, and we're going to use several examples. When you click into the Carbon Trust tool, this is the screen that you will find. And the first action is going to be to click on the Carbon Calculator button. Once you have done that, it will take you to the second screen. And at that point, you'll click on the Start button. This will then bring you to the third screen. There's quite a bit of information here. Most users of this are looking historically at data from previous years. So this talks about calculating data for your chosen reporting year. That is not relevant to this application. We are going to use it looking forward at the carbon footprint of the proposed investment. So you don't need to read this text, but rather just start by clicking on Enter My Data. That will bring you to this screen. The first thing that needs to be done is for you to put in the company name. So in the first box, company name goes in here. The next piece is to put in the reporting period. Any year can be chosen. I have chosen 2021, but any year that's offered, 2018, 2019, can be used here. It is not relevant because we're not looking at historical data, we're looking at it going forward. The site name should be the same as your company name. The reason that this is different is that, for example, in some multinationals, the company name might be different to the site name. So in this case, we would ask applicants to put in the company name and the site name as the same name, as the report will be issued in the name of the site name. The next step then is to actually complete the last 3 boxes, and this is the final stage of calculating your carbon footprint. And the first thing that we need to do is look at the emission type. We're now going to look at how to input items. We're going to start by putting in a new line for each piece of equipment that we're seeking grant aid for, and we're going to add the lines of equipment together where they're being used at the same time for the same purpose. So for example, on a production line where similar items of equipment might be used at the same time together, they can be added together and treated as a single item. We're now going to enter the emission type. There are lots of different types there in the drop-down bar that can be offered, and applicants are required to select the one that is relevant to the equipment that they are using. In the case of fridges or freezers, you may need to select 2. There will be the power from the device plus the coolant, which is the second set of numbers beginning with OR. But what we're going to do is we're going to start by picking electricity, and we're going to take a simple example and work that through, and then we'll take a more complex example. To calculate the amount, we need to estimate the energy consumption of the investment for 1 calendar year. That's calculated by the number of hours used in a day, multiplied by the number of days used in a year, multiplied by the capacity of the equipment in watts. So we're now going to look at 2 examples. The first one we're going to look at is a Whitefish filleting machine. On most manufacturers' websites, you should be able to find a technical data sheet. In some cases, you won't find the data sheet. It's not publicly available, but the agent or the sales agent can provide you with that. When you find that technical data sheet, it'll have a range of information on it. And what we're looking for is the power. So that will be found as either kilowatts, watts, or amps and volts. In this case, we can see it's kilowatts. So using this example, we're going to say that we have 12 hours use in a day, 300 days a year, and then we have 6 kilowatts of equipment in use here. So we're looking at 6 kilowatts multiplied by 1,000 is 6,000 watts. Putting that into our formula, we have 12 hours use multiplied by 300 days, taking the capacity in watts of 6,000 divided by 1,000 is 6, and that gives us 21,600 kilowatt hours. And that is what we would put in as the number. We're now going to look at a slightly more complicated example of a spiral freezer. Freezers have 2 power calculations which need to be added together, refrigeration power and motor power. You add them both together. Some freezers will also need to include the annual usage in kilos of refrigerant. There are 6 refrigerants that are listed on the calculator where the device that you are acquiring is going to be using one of these refrigerants. They need to be included in the calculation. So we're now going to take an example of the spiral freezer and work through that example. We see here the power is set out as refrigeration capacity and motor power. And we're going to take the example of the SD-SF1000 and we're going to work that through as an example. The first thing that we do is we add the refrigeration capacity and the motor power together and we get 214 kilowatts. We'll take the number of hours in a day, we're proposing that at 14, the number of days used in a year at 240, and the capacity of the equipment in watts is 214 kilowatts, multiplied by 1,000 is 214,000 watts. Again, putting this into our formula, multiplying 14 by 240, and then taking the 214,000 divided by 1,000 is 214, and that gives us a total of just over 719,000 kilowatts, a very significant increase over the previous device. And in this case, we're going to say that we have 3 freezers, so we're going to multiply that by 3. So that gives us just over 2.1 million kilowatt hours. So when we go back to our form, we're now going to input that into the form. We know we've got electricity as our emission type. We've got our amount is just over 2.1 million. And we're going to select the unit as kilowatt hours. We're then going to click Add Item to add this to our list. So you can see there just below the blue bar, you can see the electricity emission types, and we have got our total kilowatt hours is in there. And at that point, we're now going to add another item. So to enter a new item for each piece of equipment, you do by clicking on the green button. And in the case of fridges and freezers, you need to use this for items with refrigerant, as you need to input the gas as well as the power. So in this case, we're going to say that the freezer uses 20 kilograms of coolant, and we know we have got 3 freezers. For this information, it may be available from the data sheet, or again, you may need to ask your sales agent what the amount of coolant is required in 1 year. So we then add in our emission type of OR134A, and we put in our 60 kilos of coolant, and we click Add Item. This will then add it to the list. And at that point, we click Calculate My Carbon Footprint, and it will provide the result. With just over 543,000 tonnes of CO2. And at the very bottom, there's a green button, which is email results. So when you click on that, you put in your name, you put on your email address, email the results to yourself, and this is the report that you will receive within a few moments from the Carbon Trust. Where the report indicates that the carbon footprint is less than 20,000 tonnes or 20 million kilos of CO2 per year, applicants must complete a climate neutrality screening statement. Where it is more than 20 million kilos or 20,000 tonnes, applicants must complete a climate neutrality proofing statement. The screening statement effectively means that the investment is screened out. In order for us to evidence that, applicants are required to upload the carbon footprint report from the Carbon Trust that I showed you a few moments ago. Applicants are encouraged, but it is entirely optional, to also include any climate proofing or energy efficiency initiative that are being planned. This is not required. All that is required here is the carbon footprint report. However, applicants are encouraged, if they wish, to upload any additional information. The proofing statement is more complex. BAM will provide assistance with that, but just in summary, the steps to complete that are as follows. The first one is precisely the same, to project the carbon footprint, but then there's an additional step. This is set out in the guidelines for applicants. However, we won't go through it today, but it is to calculate the shadow cost of carbon and the mitigations to be put in place. This will be accompanied by energy efficiency principles and the project's compatibility with the EU guidelines. These together are a climate neutrality proofing statement, and for applicants who are in that category who will have emissions of over 20 million kilos or 20,000 tonnes per year, they're advised to contact BAM and we'll provide further assistance with that.